Welcome back to the Friday show brought to you by Woodbine. And this Saturday is the Big Turf Champions Day at Woodbine. 3 Grade 1 win and you're in Breeders' Cup Challenge races. The Vigil Stakes is the fourth graded stakes on Saturday's card. It's quite a day. The Woodbine Mile itself has a field of 6. The Natalma Stakes for 2-year-old fillies that are going toward the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies, and the Summer Stakes for colts going to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I'm Ray Paulick, joined as usual by bloodstock editor Joe Nevills. Joe, there's a lot, not just racing. There's a handicapping tournament, Breeders' Cup betting challenge. Sign up deadline is noon on Friday. So if you're watching this afternoon, I'm sorry that you didn't sign up. That's a pretty big deal. It's a $1,000 live money tournament. You can play online or on site. 2 seats for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge finals, 2 seats for the NHC, two seats for next year's Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge at Woodbine. So that's going on. There's a jackpot high five mandatory payout on Saturday. That's the 12th and final race of the day. So what do you think? Turf Champions Day. It's a big day up there.
Woodbine knows how to put it on a big weekend, and that goes for the complete experience, from fans to players to, the horsemen themselves. It's a big deal. When Woodbine has a big weekend, it's a big deal through and through. And this is another example of that.
Well, the Woodbine Mile, the win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Mile, only drew a field of 6. One of the 6 is trained by Charles Appleby for Godolphin. And Ellis Starr, the national racing analyst for Equibase, did a handicapping piece on our site. And I noticed that he had some stats on Charles Appleby. These are amazing. In the last 5 years, Ellis said, and he looked this up at Race Lens, which is the Equibase product, 41 starts in grade 1 races in North America, 17 wins.
Listen,
that's pretty good.
He comes to town and he goes home with the purses. That's what he does. I mean, it's fantastic. I keep putting him on the Eclipse ballot. Like, he does. I don't know if he doesn't run enough to deserve to win the big trophy. I know that, but his winning percentage is so insane, and he comes over here with such precision strikes that I think he deserves at least a mention for finalists. He deserves a seat at the table for the work that he does coming over here. We've given awards and finalists nods to horses that ran over here once for the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah,
Appleby comes over here for the big race days in Woodbine, Saratoga, Breeders' Cup. He'll send some over for Keeneland. And more often than not, well, I guess not more often than not, you just had the numbers, but it sure feels like more often than not, you go winner.
Yeah. So he's got Master of the Seas, who was a really good 2-year-old. In England, just got beat a nose in the 2000 Guineas, only ran once the following year. Good at 3, only ran once the following year, and then has come back this year with some decent races. Even money favorite in the Ricoh Woodbine Mile. I don't know if there's anybody in there that can beat him on his best. And when you consider that turf course is a really fair course, There's nothing tricky about it. There's a big stretch. Usually the best horse wins.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little interested to see what happens with number 3, Shirl Spite. Johnny V's coming in town for the mount. I believe, if that's not the first time he's ridden the horse, it's one of the first times. It's been a while. I don't see his name in the PPs anywhere, so it's probably been quite a while. And he's known for moving a horse up, so it's going to be a tall task. I honestly don't think anyone's going to beat the Godolphin horse, but yeah. I'll be interested to see how the new rider sort of melds with Shirl Spite there, because Shirl Spite can throw you a good race when he wants to.
The Summer Stakes. Mark Casse has 5 of the 11 horses entered. Break up the Yankees. And then what's the other one? The Natalma. Cassie's only got 4 in there.
Well, interesting thing about the Summer Stakes is there's a lot of fillies in this race. Go With Gusto, Bolton Nori, Erosa, several of them that are cross-entered in the Natalma. I'm not sure what the scratches look like right now, but I am curious to see if a lot of connections were trying to avoid another Godolphin / Charlie Appleby horse in the Natalma number 1 Dazzling Star. won a maiden race over in England earlier this year, and maybe some people just decided it might be easier to beat a field of colts than it is to beat a Godolphin horse, a Godolphin filly. So let's give it a try.
Yeah, Dazzling Star is the morning line favorite, I think, in the Natalma, breaking from the rail post. William Buick in to ride both of them, and he's about as good as anybody.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is a little bit of a potpourri Friday show, as the old Jeopardy category used to be. We talked a little bit about the races on the Turf Champions Day, but let's look forward, since we got 3 of these Breeders' Cup Win and You're In races today. None are for the Classic, but in the Classic division, I don't know that I've seen this before, but the top 3 horses in the poll, the weekly poll for the Classic division, are 3-year-olds, and 5 of the top 10 Classic horses are 3-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Is it that strong of a 3-year-old division, or is it that weak of an older horse division, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but honestly, I think it leans more toward the second. I think it's just not a very great older male division. Not too much disrespect to White Barrio, but when White Barrio is your best shot to be the top older male, I mean, that's not great. That's just, he's a good horse. He ran very well in the Whitney. But when you think of the great handicap horses of the past decade, he's not in the conversation. Honestly, there aren't a whole lot of 3-year-olds that strike my imagination either, but that's tough when he's your best shot against the 3-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, the 3-year-olds, I think Arcangelo became the first of the 3-year-olds to win more than one Grade 1 race this year. So it's not like there's a standout in that group. He's currently number 1 on the Breeders' Cup Classic poll. Geaux Rocket Ride is number 2, even though he was beat by the 3rd horse, Arabian Knight.
That one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, well, they're 1-1 because Geaux Rocket Ride won the Haskell, but Arabian Knight did win the Breeders' Cup Classic distance of 1.25 miles
against older,
and against weak older, right?
Yes, listen, everything is weak older right now. That's just the way it is.
But the 5th horse on this list is Forte, and Forte came into the year as the champion. He was, won the Florida Derby, maybe not as impressively as we would have liked. And then, of course, scratched out of the Kentucky Derby with a foot issue. He hasn't really come back to show us that form he had last year and early this year.
I mean, last year's form was so exciting that's hard for any horse to match, but it's not like he's been throwing clunkers this whole time. He won the Jim Dandy. He ran respectably enough in the Travers. He ran a nice second in the Belmont. He's not winning the races the way that he used to, but he's still showing up. It's not, looking at a horse like Mage, whose form has just completely fallen off. Like, you look at what happened in the Travers and you kind of wonder what happened there, but he's still there. It wouldn't be completely, unreasonable for him to show up in his next race, for Forte to show up in his next race and be the old horse he was, because I think there's still parts of that in there. He just hasn't been able to show it the last few races.
Yeah, Mage was big disappointment last out to me. He's 9th on the poll. The other 4 older horses are Bright Future, new to the list. Proxy, who we've seen, a 5-year-old horse. We've seen him around quite a bit. Number 8 is a horse that a lot of people probably haven't heard of, Ushba Tesoro. Japanese horse that won the Dubai World Cup, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to have to remind me of that one, because that one, I looked at that one and didn't have time to look at Equibase, so I was like, okay, I'm sure this horse is good. The voters are assuring me this is a decent horse, but I've got no notes on this one. This is Peyton and Eli Manning talking about how all their notes were on Aaron Rodgers before the game. That's what's going on right now.
Well, Ushba Tesoro has not raced since the spring. He's due for a race in September 27. I'm not sure which race it is in Japan, but they say they're coming. They say they're coming to the Breeders' Cup Classic, and we have seen Japanese horses around the world doing things that they weren't doing 10 years ago, winning in Dubai, winning Breeders' Cup races, winning in Saudi Arabia. So I would say, a future bet on Ushba Tesoro, well, maybe not the worst thing, right?
I don't hate it. I mean, you look at the Derby this year, there were 3 legitimate Japanese horses that came over for the Derby, and, we had one scratch, and none of them really ran up to their what we thought their potential was. I know I was really high on Derma Sotogake for the Derby this year, and he didn't really do the thing that I was hoping he'd do. But eventually they're going to break through, and they're already breaking through elsewhere in the world. Right. It's only a matter of time before they get the really top tier wins in America. They've won Breeders' Cup races, but it's only a matter of time before we see them win the Classic, the Derby, those really top of the pyramid races.
Rounding out the top 10 is Zandon, a 4-year-old who hasn't won this year. I think he's 0 for 3. That's how weak the Classic
is. Right? If you have stock that you are selling in Zandon, I will buy it. He is due. I love that horse. Eventually he is going to hit, and he's going to make me look very smart. And until then, I believe.
Spoken like a voter on the poll. I don't know if you voted.
I am actually not a voter, full disclosure. Okay. Not a voter.
All right. Well, one of the things that's interesting to me on this list is Forte, and we haven't really talked about this. The Keeneland sales are going on right now as we speak. Forte was one of 43 yearlings bought at the Keeneland September sale in 2021 by Jacob West Bloodstock on behalf of Mike Rapoli and Vincent Viola's St. Elias stable. 43 yearlings, 40 of them were colts. I think they spent $16 million on those 43 horses. Forte was a champion. Grade 1 winner at 2. He's a Grade 1 winner at 3. Could win the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's a stallion prospect. My understanding is he was valued around 18 to 20 million. So just doing the numbers, it looks to me like the Rapoli Viola thing paid off just with that one horse. And he was only $110,000 yearling, one of the cheapest ones they bought, actually.
Yeah, it's funny. After one of the sessions of the Keeneland September sale, Mike Rapoli was talking to the media, and he was saying that he bought 2 Violence colts that year. One of them was for the 180 or so that Forte brought, and then he bought one for, if it wasn't $1 million, it was close. The expensive one was at New Vocations, and Forte is going to run the Breeders' Cup Classic. So it's just, sometimes you hit with the big one, sometimes you hit with the little one, and sometimes horse racing is just weird.
And the thing that I find interesting is for two guys to go out together and buy 43 yearlings. We're seeing this was an extreme case of it, but we've seen the same thing with the partnership of SF Racing, Starlight, Mataket, and a bunch of other partners. I think up to 10 different entities are part of those horses, and it's kind of changing the game. They're just saying we need numbers, and each of these people might have gone out on their own and bought 3 to 5 yearlings, but together they can afford, they pool their money. They get a bloodstock agent to look over the horse, try to find the best. And they might have between 20 and 40 horses, like the Rapoli and SF Racing. And all they need is 1 or 2 of them to really hit.
Yeah. And what's interesting there is that the auction price is just the entry fee for all of this. Then you have to train all of these horses. For regular watchers of the Friday show, you might recall that we had a video with Gary Contessa where one of the questions that he answered was, how much does it cost to keep a horse in training? And he said that it costs about $50,000 to $60,000 for a horse in New York running at that level. Assuming that you're one of these bigger partnerships, you're probably doing a bigger day rate even than that. So, right. We're talking quite a lot of money beyond the initial purchase price. So, clearing that bar is even more difficult than it looks like on paper.
When I first started going to the yearling sales in Kentucky, there weren't these conglomerates working together. There were individual buyers. Of course, back then the Maktoum family was a huge buyer at the sales. But we've kind of seen it evolve. Coolmore, I think, is the first group to really take a look at it. They have individual investors, Michael Tabor, Derek Smith, and so on. And they're not trying to corner the market, but they're just trying to buy the best prospects they can that have a chance of making it as a stallion. And they've done very, very well over the years. And I think what SF and what these other groups have done, Rapoli and Viola, and there's others. There's some new ones this year that are really buying high-end horses, spreading the risk. It's kind of changed the game.
Yeah. And the thing is, they're not just buying the giant $1 million horses either.
Right.
That's, you talk about Coolmore. Typically, they're playing in the 7-figure range, or, at least very high 6 figures. But a lot of these partnerships are buying as low as, Forte was in the low 6 figures. These aren't all $1 million horses that they're going after. It's finding ones that fit the program, depending, and, the price isn't quite as relevant.
Well, speaking of price, let's look at the horse that's number 1 on the list for the Breeders' Cup Classic, Arcangelo. What was his sale price?
I believe it was 35,000.
Yeah. a son of Arrogate that either slipped through the cracks or had some things that other buyers weren't willing to accept.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting pretty right now as the leader in the clubhouse as far as the 3-year-old championship and maybe horse of the year goes.
Absolutely. And, you look ahead to a horse like that, $35,000 purchase price, already made a lot of money on the racetrack. And I don't know anything about his stud plans. I don't know if he's already been signed. They haven't announced it. I don't know kind of what's going on. I don't have any inside information on that. But you have to figure, as the first and potentially only son of Arrogate, who's going to be a stallion prospect of this level, that, I would imagine farms are throwing themselves at the connections trying to get this horse booked if they haven't already booked him already. And I bet there's a premium for that, because Arrogate's done very well with his first few crops, and they're not going to be making any more of them. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's going to get even more lucrative down the road, especially if he wins the Classic.
Well, if the goal of the yearling buyer is to buy a stallion prospect, which is the goal of a lot of these buyers, I'm not sure that was the case with Arcangelo.
It was, but he was looking to buy a regional stallion prospect. He just wanted to get a stallion for Pennsylvania.
So how many of these 5 horses in the top 10 are we going to see racing next year as 4-year-olds, or is the older horse division going to fall apart kind of like this year's did?
That's a tough question. I think it depends on who wins and who's spoken for at the time. Yeah. I think if any of those horses in the top 5 win, you're probably going to see them go to stud. That seems to be the way that things go. Like, it wouldn't, they might stick around for the Pegasus depending on, if a connection feels like they want to get one more start out of them, or if there's something to be gained from that. But it wouldn't surprise me if all 5 of them were off to stud by this time next year. Arcangelo, Geaux Rocket Ride, Arabian Knight, White Abarrio, and Forte. Some of them, I could see White Abarrio running another year. He's a son of Race Day, I believe, which isn't exactly it's not he's a grandson of Tappet, but it's not exactly a Tappet. It's not an Into Mischief. It's not an immediately commercial sire line. Beyond that, the rest of them have pretty commercial sire lines on there. I could see all of them going to stud next year.
Yeah. Well, then we'll have the 2-year-olds to look forward to.
Exactly.
In 2024.
Just the conveyor belt starts rolling back around, man.
All right. Well, that is interesting conversation about the stallion prospects and the sales. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Friday Show. Tune in on Saturday for Turf Champions Day at Woodbine. 3 win-and-you're-in races, 4 graded stakes on the card, handicapping tournament, and mandatory payout in the Super High 5 jackpot. So good luck to everybody that is playing Woodbine, and we'll see you next week on the Friday Show.
Support award-winning independent horse industry journalism and become a Paulick Report insider on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, insiders get access to exclusive Q&As with Paulick Report staff, insight behind our editorial process, exclusive opinions and on-site analysis, Paulick Report merch, and more. This is not a paywall. The website you know and love will always be the same. But if you want more, and you want to make our coverage even better, visit patreon.com/Paulick Report and become a Paulick Report insider today.